Controversial take here, but this video is going to be all about me making the assertion that Dinosaur, located at Disney's Animal Kingdom, is actually one of Disney's best attractions. You know what? Let's take it a step further. I would actually make the case that Dinosaur, when compared to its counterpart, the Indiana Jones Adventure, located at Disneyland, is actually the better ride. Yeah, it's that thing again, where I make a statement that goes against popular consensus, and then I spend a little bit of time making very precise points to back up my arguments. Let me be clear though, I don't think that Indiana Jones is a bad attraction by any means. In fact, I would argue it's one of the best attractions Disney has ever created. I just think that Dinosaur gets a lot of unfair criticism that is often parroted around the Disney community, and today I would like to change the narrative. The fact is, Dinosaur is executing a lot of things really well, and I would like to take the time to change your mind on it. So, here is why Dinosaur is better than the Indiana Jones Adventure. The first place we should start is with the ride vehicles themselves. The Indiana Jones Adventure opened first in 1995, utilizing what is known as the Enhanced Motion Vehicle. Placed on a slot car style track, the ride path itself changes elevation frequently, but is not a rough experience. The motion of the vehicle comes from the hydraulics placed under where guests are seated. Essentially, it's a motion simulator placed on top of a slot car. The motion capability of the vehicle allows it to be programmed to tell a story through movement. For example, while the slot car itself is on a smooth surface, the hydraulics can simulate movements such as bumpy terrain, or even react and draw back from a dangerous element. This is a fundamental component in what makes Indy work so well as a ride, allowing it to feel rugged and adventurous in a way that a tracked dark ride on a smooth, flat surface wouldn't be able to convey. Located in Disneyland's Adventureland, the queue for Indy blends really well as it moves up alongside the Jungle Cruise. Throughout both outside and inside, the queue does contain a number of props and Easter eggs that fans of the films can discover. One of the more interesting aspects of the queue are the glyphs found throughout, which can be decoded into foreboding messages using a key. However, Disneyland no longer offers this key because they were just paper slips, but it can still be found on the Play Disney Parks app if you really want to access it. The temple, through both its art and a number of letters and telegrams found scattered throughout, conveys the story of the deity Mara. When visited, Mara may offer worshippers one of three things, which are wealth, youth, or visions of the future, as long as no one looks into Mara's eyes. The Temple of the Forbidden Eye, as it's called, was discovered by Indiana Jones himself. However, having run out of funds, Sala started to conduct tours on the site to raise money for further excavation. As guests move through the queue, a number of interesting elements can be observed. For example, if the pole in this room is pushed in, it will trigger a trap where the ceiling starts to descend as spikes emerge. This effect was turned off as it was perceived as too scary, but the sound trigger still plays. Another element is this rope holding up a digging archaeologist, triggering a sound cue when pulled. Already, you can see with the details that this experience is quite immersive, telling its story effectively if you take the time to stop and notice things. As you reach the end of the queue, a projector plays a reel that conveys exposition and safety instructions before boarding the vehicles. The first scene of the ride takes you into the Chamber of Destiny, where Mara's gift is chosen, but it's really just randomized which one your vehicle gets. As you move through the door, Mara states that someone has looked into their eyes and retracts the gift. Depending on what the gift is, the projection mapping on Mara's face will change to reflect this. Having been cursed, riders will now have to face the Gates of Doom, first traveling through a tunnel with lightning flashes. Once the vehicle reaches the gates, Indy himself can be seen pushing them closed, scolding the guests for looking into the eyes of Mara and directing them up the stairs. Having emerged into a large cavern, you can see a perilous bridge over a pit of lava with Mara's face back behind it. Turning left, the vehicle moves through a room full of skeletons where some will pop up towards the vehicle, while a strong wind effect blows through the scene. Now moving into darkness, the lights of the ride vehicle flicker on, revealing a room full of beetles and buffeting guests with airbursts. Now emerging out onto the bridge, the vehicle traverses across as the head of Mara attempts to destroy the riders, achieved through a laser effect coming from one of the eyes. Having escaped, the vehicle moves through a snake temple, where a large cobra lurches at the riders. The vehicle turns to the right and travels behind the head of Mara into a room full of skulls. The riders cross the pit of lava once more, before then finding themselves in the darkness where they can hear the scurrying of rats. The vehicle accelerates forward into a room where skeletons are painted on the wall, and as the riders move through, airbursts simulate blow darts whizzing past, just barely missing them. The vehicle pulls up and stops as Indy is spotted, hanging from a rope. Suddenly, a large boulder appears and rolls towards riders. The vehicle gives the illusion of reversing, which is achieved as the walls of the room move forward. Suddenly, the vehicle tilts downwards and out of the path of the boulder. Finally, in the last scene, the vehicle pulls up alongside Indy, where a quippy one-liner is chosen at random for him to say, with the cracked boulder behind him. The experience then ends as the vehicle pulls back into the station. The Indiana Jones adventure is certainly an impressive experience. The theming is superb, and the ride itself, using a number of interesting effects such as wind, airbursts, and pyro, along with the enhanced motion of the vehicle, allows it to excel as a fun sensory experience. Dinosaur came 3 years after Indy, opening with Animal Kingdom in 1998. Having originally been titled Countdown to Extinction, it was renamed and slightly modified in 2000 to create synergy between the film of the same name. However, Dinosaur is very much devolved from the film, acting instead as a well-themed component of Dinoland USA. If you've watched my video, The History of Disney and Dinosaurs, I've already covered the complex theming of this land. Often overlooked, Dinoland USA is easily one of the best themed areas of any theme park in the world, even with the inclusion of Chester and Hester's Dinorama. However, it would take far too long to cover all of that here, so I'm going to highly recommend checking out that video at the timestamp 1723. If I have to boil down the story of Dinoland though, it's this. Dinosaur bones were found in the town, and it became an attraction for fossil hunters and paleontologists. Numerous years later, the Dino Institute was founded and built a research center back in the woods. However, with the invention of time travel technology, they began offering tours back in time to help keep money flowing into the Institute. Throughout the extended queue, which is not often used, you can see a number of dinosaur statues among the ferns. Once inside the building though, the entry hall has some small displays of dinosaur fossils and educational exhibits. Emerging into the rotunda, more fossils can be found in displays, with a Carnotaurus skeleton being featured in the middle. Along the upper part of the walls are murals depicting different ages of prehistoric life. From this point, guests are held until they're let into one of the 2 pre-show rooms. As they enter, they're greeted by the director of the Dino Institute, Dr. Marsh, who explains that guests will be embarking on a journey back in time on a vehicle called the Time Rover. The video then switches to the control center, where Dr. Seeker gives a briefing to the guests. He states that they're going to go on a mission to retrieve an iguanodon at the end of the Cretaceous period. However, Dr. Marsh interrupts, stating these time coordinates would take people to right before when a giant asteroid hit the Earth, and that this was not the authorized tour. Dr. Seeker then quickly goes over safety instructions, and after Dr. Marsh leaves, reveals that he's gotten computer access to the Time Rovers, sending the guests on his original mission. After the pre-show lets out, you travel down into the basement of the Dino Institute, which serves as the load platform for the Time Rovers. Once boarded, you then travel up an incline as you enter a machine that allows your vehicle to travel back in time. Immediately, the vehicle moves left, where you witness a Styragosaurus leaning against a tree as a small volcanic vent flares up. As you travel through the jungle, you witness an opening where an Alioramus is consuming another creature. Also in this opening, you can see a Parasaurolophus in the distance, and a small Velociraptor on your left. Suddenly, Dr. Seeker has your vehicle lock onto the coordinates of his lost dinosaur, and the vehicle speeds off quickly into the dark jungle. After a bit of terrain traversing in the dark, the Time Rover comes to a stop to investigate a large dinosaur ahead. It's revealed that this dinosaur is a surprised Carnotaurus, and the vehicle quickly speeds off to safety. Slowing down, you encounter a Saltosaurus and accidentally run over its tail. The next part of the ride track brings you past some Pterodactylus, and you descend into the darkness again where you encounter Compsognathus leaping over the ride vehicle. Traveling through the jungle again, the vehicle loses traction as it gets stuck in the mud. Suddenly, with flashes of lightning, the Carnotaurus appears from behind vegetation, chasing the ride vehicle as you escape back into the dark. From here, the enhanced motion vehicle simulates movement as you hear the Carnotaurus chasing you from behind. Suddenly, without warning, you encounter it in front of you again, this time standing to its full height. The Time Rover peels out once more through the jungle, finally finding the iguanodon that you were searching for as he holds up a tree to let you escape. Finally, as the meteor is seconds away from hitting, a flash of light reveals the Carnotaurus one last time, as Dr. Seeker asks the guests to brace for impact. With seconds to spare, the Time Rover successfully finds itself back in the tunnel and returns to the Dino Institute, having successfully retrieved the iguanodon. Dinosaur is definitely one of the more intense Disney rides ever created, but I do think it has its place as a classic. Like the Indiana Jones adventure, it's a highly detailed and immersive experience that reflects some of the best attraction design to come out of Imagineering. Now that I've covered the content of both attractions though, let's really get into breaking down the design differences between both. I often hear a lot of complaints aimed towards Dinosaur that tend to be, well, poorly thought out. There's a lot of, my kid was too scared on it. Who cares? Shut up. Don't ride it then. But one of the most common criticisms parroted around is that the ride is lazy. Lazy in the sense that it uses darkness as a crutch instead of fully theming the entire ride track. Well, first, what is themed is really well done, and I don't think that can be denied. Second though, the darkness very much seems like an intentional design choice. If you weren't aware, Indy and Dinosaur share almost identical ride tracks, with only some small changes between them. However, whereas Indy is for the most part lit up and gives you a sense of bearing, I believe that the darkness of Dinosaur exists intentionally to disorient the riders. As you're moving through the jungle, the motion of the hydraulics on the ride vehicle simulates turns and uneven terrain that isn't there. This is a clever effect, as the progression between locations is conveyed not visually, but through simulated motion. As I also just stated, I believe that the darkness is also intended to disorient the riders, purposefully making them feel lost and not knowing where they're going. In Indy, when you first witness the bridge over the lava pit, that builds up anticipation because you know you're going to be going over it later. However, with Dinosaur, the darkness builds anticipation through the unknown. When you first encounter the Carnotaurus, an audio cue from Seeker indicates that there's something big ahead, but he clearly doesn't know what. The sudden approach makes the scene quite a bit more intense. The same also applies with the second encounter, where as you escape from the Carnotaurus, audio cues allow you to hear it chasing you from behind. Because this portion is also in the dark, it manages to convey a lot more distance and movement than it would have if the track had been lit. Another aspect that I like about this is how it allows the chase to also feel just as intense. By removing the visual element, which is our primary sense, the disorientation and overwhelming sound cues make the experience feel much more visceral. Yes, it is true that Indy completely themes all of its scenes, but the darkness on Dinosaur is very much an intentional design choice, meant to create a more intense experience. This doesn't make one attraction better than the other, but I'm tired of seeing this criticism from people who don't understand what the ride is trying to do. However, one aspect where Dinosaur shines is through its storytelling. Whereas Indy is relegated to its own plot in Adventureland, Dinosaur contributes to the overall story of Dinoland, expanding the narrative beyond just the show building. That being said, the actual queue space for Dinosaur is weaker than Indy, but overall is still more narratively ambitious because of its connection to the land as a whole. I also feel that Dinosaur manages to convey its specific narrative better inside its show building as well though. For example, a lot of world building can be found throughout the queue for Indy, but since the ride doesn't pull in the same wait times as it did when it opened, The average person oftentimes just walks past the queue elements and fails to observe the story that they're telling. Meanwhile, Dinosaur requires you to watch the pre-show before actually allowing you to board the vehicle. I often agree with the lesson, show don't tell, when it comes to effective filmmaking, but at the very least, everyone going on Dinosaur knows their role after the exposition of the pre-show. I've also observed a few other weaknesses with Indy's narrative as well. For example, Indy's audio often comes from the ride track, sometimes making it difficult to understand what's being conveyed to the riders. Meanwhile, Seeker's audio comes from the ride vehicle itself, making it difficult to miss his commentary. Dinosaur itself is also far more narrative driven, whereas Indy is more about the experience. What does that mean? Well, again, this isn't necessarily a bad design choice, but the various rooms of Indy don't actually do anything to advance the narrative. Each room features some novel sense of danger, whether it be venomous snakes, lava, or blow darts. These various traps have nothing to thematically tie them together, simply borrowing from the most popular elements of the films. However, with Dinosaur, every scene works to further the narrative. As you emerge back in time, you find yourself on the edge of the jungle where you cautiously move past various dinosaurs. However, after a minute of this, Seeker activates the automatic tracking for the Time Rover, as your goal is to retrieve the Iguanodon. You of course encounter a series of dangerous carnivores and work to escape them, but the plot still continues to move forward until it's resolved, when you escape back to the present with your new passenger. To quickly summarize, both Indy and Dinosaur are solid, high-caliber attractions. However, I often see people make the claim that Indy is miles better, but can never really justify why that's the case, other than making poor arguments, claiming that Dinosaur isn't themed as well, which obviously isn't the case. Because Dinosaur is more thematically cohesive, tying into Dinoland's overall theming and tells its story more effectively, that's the edge it needs for me to make the claim that it's better than Indy. Really though, the primary difference between these attractions is just in design philosophy. I'm essentially saying that I prefer Dinosaur because its narrative is more clear, whereas Indy is less story and more premise. I'm not making the claim that it's a bad thing, because if we look at other classic attractions such as Space Mountain, which exists by only relying on a single premise, such as Rocket Through Space, we can see how that's a testament to why certain attractions should be designed in that way. Simply put, this works great for Indy, bringing you into a trapped temple, but Dinosaur is simply more ambitious in this regard. With all of this being said though, I know that almost everyone will claim that Indy is better. So, since that's the case, I'm curious for people to tell me why they think so. If that's the argument you want to make, I would like to hear specific points about what Indy does different, and why you think it's better from a design and narrative standpoint. As always, if you enjoy these types of video essays, it helps the video out to just simply leave a like on it. I also recommend hitting the subscribe button with bell notification, so as to be alerted when new videos are released.